Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials, if you're into that sort of thing, in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino DeCespedes, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
Oh, I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. The football calendar marches on. We're in international break, but plenty of things are still happening. And there's just no shortage of excitement every single day, it feels like.
Yeah, it's like a nice lull. You know, like we're getting to the stretch run of the NWSL season. Playoffs right around the corner. Champions League match day 3 and 4. I mean, we're getting into the stretch run. So this is like nice. This international break is a nice, fun palate cleanser. A lot of fun football. Really excited to get into it with you. Quick programming reminder. I kind of already covered it. So NWSL playoffs kick off Friday, November 8th. We'll be back with a playoff preview and an award show. We might combine those. That might make a little bit of sense. Yeah. And then obviously Champions League returns November 12th and November 13th. We'll be back before those games kick off. We dropped an early preview last week. Definitely go back and check that out. We looked at all 8 matchups. Went way in depth on those. With all that said, where you want to get started?
Let's get started with a beer. And I think it's a beer in honor of the best player in the world. Maybe the best player in the world? Maybe several of the best players in the world is maybe the most diplomatic way to say it.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. I think I would like to get started with the Ballon winner, Iceland Bonmatí.
I like it. So I think the consensus cooled off on Aitana as like best player in the world.
Yeah.
Pretty wild to see Barcelona sweep the top 3 spots.
Yeah.
CGH in the 2nd spot, Salma Paralluelo in the 3rd spot. So Barcelona in 41 Liga F and Champions League matches, 38 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. Obviously, Aitana played huge in a bunch of those games. But I don't know, a little bit of controversy. I got to say, I was a little bit surprised. I think I had CGH as my winner. What do you think when the news dropped?
I think it's a fair position to hold. I mean, last year during huge stretches of the Champions League, obviously huge stretches of Liga F, CGH looked like the best player on the team. She looked like the engine for their attack. Defenders could not do anything with her going up and down the wings. And then if she gets into the middle of the field, she's just as deadly. You know, I think it's a fair position to have. One of the GOATs out there, Lucy Ward, almost immediately put out there that CGH should have been the Ballon d'Or winner this year. So yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to believe that.
Yeah, Lucy Ward in the final, I think, had that same position. Was talking about it as somewhat of a no-brainer. When you look at the numbers, you can understand where Lucy was coming from. CGH, 26 goals, 23 assists, which is insane.
Jesus.
Aitana, 14 goals, 15 assists. And then when you zoom in, I was actually surprised by this. I think I was expecting, so those top line numbers strongly favor Graham Hansen. But I think the closer you look, it's more than just those numbers. So shot creating actions per 90, CGH 8.33, Aitana 6.08. That's a pretty big gulf.
Yeah.
Goal creating actions per 90, Graham Hansen 1.6, Aitana 1.1. And of Barcelona's field players with at least 1,800 minutes, Aitana was 12th on the team in plus minus per 90. The numbers didn't totally back up the selection, but I think probably what voters might have been looking at were those big game moments. So you look at Barcelona down to Chelsea, 1-0 on aggregate at Stamford Bridge. Who cracks the seal on that one? Iceland Bonmatí, 25th minute to even the score. This is before the Khadija Buchanan red card. To rewind back around in the quarters, Barcelona's up on Braun 2-1 on aggregate. In the rematch, Aitana, obviously gets another one to crack the seal on that one and to put them up 3-1 and kind of like begin the separation there. And then the Champions League final against Lyon, scoreless until the 63rd. Who scores there again? Aitana. Her big moments were bigger than I think, anybody else's big moments, pretty much, I don't know, maybe worldwide, you might say.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it comes down to. I know people don't like to kind of look at things this way, and I totally get why they don't. I'm not even sure I'm totally sold on this, but there is a level of momentum that comes when you put together your second straight amazing year.
Yep.
And so she's coming off the World Cup. She's coming off another Champions League, another Liga F in 2023, and now she kind of rolls that into 2024. She's the central hub of the midfield. You're going to get the people who say like, shot creating actions, goal creating actions. It's hard to capture exactly what Bonmatí brings to the field, like any time they play. But as much as I give credence to that, the numbers are the numbers. And what I always say is when people like belittle, stat nerds and things like that, the numbers are just a depiction of what's happening on the field also.
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
again, I realize I'm probably doing quite a bit of fence sitting here. I think I'm still a believer that Iceland Bonmatí is probably the best player in the world. I ditched the probably. I think she's the best. I think her intelligence and the way she kind of dictates the geometry of the field for Barcelona, I think that makes her the best. I'm just not going to yell at anybody who says CGH, they would take her over.
I like it. And I think those two players are 1-2 on pretty much everybody's ballot. Life goes on, as we say. There was also some football played in Europe this week.
Yeah, I want to go quickly to a match that was played today on the day we're recording, October 28th. Germany lost 2-1 to Australia. Who cares? It's a friendly. It doesn't matter. What really was important there, we got to give our proper respect to Alexandra Popp, Alex Popp of Wolfsburg, of course, the German legend. This was her final match for Germany's national team. Over the course of her career with Germany, she scored 67 goals. She led them to be runners-up in the 2022 Euros. She notched a brace in the semifinals in their win over France to get them to the final. And then in just a really, really hard luck moment that you hate to see any athlete go through, but especially an elite athlete like that, she gets injured in the warm-ups of the final of the 2022 Euros against England, has to miss that match. England obviously squeaks it out. I don't begrudge any German fan for saying they probably would have won that final at Wembley if they had Popp, even though they'd be wrong and England was going to win anyway. I digress. Popp, absolute legend, played in 4 World Cups for the Germans. Bronze boot in 2023, even though they didn't even make it out of the group stage in this last World Cup.
Wow.
Still had the third most goals in that tournament. German Footballer of the Year 3 times. I want to mention Germany's manager, Christian Vuk. We don't like to play into some of the European stereotypes in this program, but let's just make the joke. German folks, maybe not the most sentimental in the world. So let's take a look at this quote by their manager, Vuk. Quote, "All this talk about a goodbye game is getting a bit much for me," Vuk said on Friday before the match. And there were 2 other players retiring here. Merle Frams and Marina Hegering retiring from international play, didn't get playing time, didn't get into the squad because he wanted to see younger players play to get into the future of the squad. So Alex Popp still breaks through all that non-sentimentality, and she's such a legend. She still gets her 15 minutes, even though I think when they took her off at 15 minutes, I think after the match, I got the quote here. Quote, "It was a bit short. I was looking up at the clock, keeping eye on the time, and I thought, oh no, it's up already." So Germany, not here for the emotional celebrations, but Alex Popp still gets one because that's how much of a legend she is.
Real piece of work, this guy. Shout out to Alex Popp. Also, how about a bronze medal to kind of close out the international career in the last year of activity? And if you recall, in the Olympics, they had Popp playing everywhere. Central midfield, defensive mid. She was kind of all over, totally out of position, just kind of filling whatever spot was needed. And kind of leaves this German side maybe back on the upswing. Obviously, a super disappointing World Cup. Now it kind of feels like Germany is like back on that very upper echelon. And obviously Popp, her fingerprints are all over that team and that team's DNA. So got to salute the legend, the captain, great career.
Yeah, and still more to give for Wolfsburg. So,
Totally.
That'll be exciting to watch in the Champions League and to see kind of how she rounds out her club career. But absolutely legend in the game in the international play.
Oh, nice. Mid-episode salute. There you go.
Had to do it for her.
Speaking of this German team, they were in action late last week against your Lionesses. A lot of fireworks. What'd you take away from that one? Also a friendly, but maybe not so friendly.
Yeah, I mentioned the 2022 Euro final at Wembley. First time these 2 squads have met at Wembley since the Lionesses took home the European Championship. Defending was optional, especially in the first half of this one. There were free runners, defenders kind of getting pulled into the middle, completely disregarding wingers running free behind them. And that's pretty much how most of the goals in this one were scored. I saw Hannah Hampton, English goalkeeper, getting a little bit of stick online for a poor performance. I will say, I think there were multiple shots that she should have held. She looked by probably the 50th minute, maybe even, it might have even still been the first half. She kind of had a look in her eyes of like, yo, is this ever going to stop? Like, she looked a little overwhelmed out there, but that back line did her no favors.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. And I think Hampton almost let one in right before halftime. And I think if that would have happened, they had already started showing Mary F. Earps, just in her warm-up gear, like stone face, like, all right, I can't react to, obviously that's what they're looking for. But I'm used to when we see these friendlies, like the offense looking a little bit disjointed. And I think that's kind of flipped a little bit recently, where these players play so much on their club teams and they have their philosophy. They know where to go, where to be. And now it's like you drop them in. All of a sudden, nobody knows what to do, where to defend. And I think everybody's kind of their head was spinning. I mean, Millie Bright's foul on Dahlman to kind of like draw that first penalty. You already kind of knew what kind of game it was going to be. But Lionesses fought back.
Yeah, they got back into it, and credit to them. I think the penalty on Gavin, the handball in the box, I think people could say like that's a bit soft, but I think when you go down for the slide tackle and your arm is way up and the pass hits your arm, you could probably get away with that. I think we could live with that. And then Stanway hits the absolute laser off the really nice run of play between Russo and Meade. But I'll just say it, man, not to be totally negative, or maybe this is whatever my heritage is, whatever slices of England and the UK are coming in here and just creep in the negativity. If you defend like that, you don't deserve to win, frankly. And credit to them for fighting back. But if you defend like that against Spain, you're drawing dead. You have a literal 0% chance of beating them. And if you defend like that against like Japan or Brazil or the USA, obviously.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, I would probably say against the USA with triple espresso, you defend like that, you have a 0% chance of winning. But you defend like that against Japan or Brazil, you're not beating them either.
Yeah, just look super disorganized. And I think I wouldn't expect them to look, that way, heading into a major tournament. Obviously, we got the Euros next year.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're friendlies. We're out here kicking the ball around. Nobody wants to kind of get embarrassed, but not the way that you want to wrap that one up against a big time rival. There was also some Euro qualifying results last week. Everything went kind of as expected. Sweden went to Luxembourg, got a big 4-0 win. Goals from Felipe Angeldal, JRK, Stina Blackstenius. Norway heads to Albania. They take home a 5-0 win. Frida Leonardsen Manum, she scores a goal. Karina Shavik from Vålerenga, she gets an assist. Ada Hegerberg goal, assist from Guro Reiten. Norway back on track. And Portugal went to Azerbaijan and got a big 4-1 win on the road. Sporting CP's Anna Capetta had a goal and an assist in that one. All three of those teams now head back home to kind of sew up these ties and continue their march towards the 2025 Euros.
Love a 5-0 victory for Norway over Albania or anybody. Frida Manum's goal was a banger. Love to see that for our Norwegian pals out there.
Let's go. I want them to get it together so bad. I want this team to make a real run here in the Euros and in the 27 World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of the 27 World Cup, I don't know. I feel like we're officially in road to the 2027 World Cup here. We're going to talk a little U.S. women's national team. They obviously go back-to-back against Iceland. A 3-1 victory in Austin. They follow that up with a 3-1 victory in Nashville. What were your big What were your big takeaways from these two back-to-back 3-1 victories?
I think in the first match, USA dominates the run of play. They have pretty much their full starting 11 out there, minus Rodman, maybe minus Davidson, depending on how you feel about her as a permanent center back pairing with Girma. And in the second match, things are obviously a lot closer, but that's because you're playing without Naomi Girma, Lindsay Horan, Sophie Smith, and Emily Fox in your starting 11, or Alyssa Nair in goal. And so, Iceland, we've seen a lot of these players in the Champions League. These are good players on that side. And they played to what I thought was a fair half of football with Iceland up 1-0. And I know you had your eyes on one spot in the field in particular for USA.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's kind of easy to overlook. I want to rewind back to the match one real quick.
Yeah.
If you look at it, they spent 68 of the 90 plus minutes even on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
Just the way that game broke out. So it's like USA was in control for sure and looked the better team. But I just kind of wish, and obviously where, I just made the point earlier about, these international breaks where now it's like, all right, we're going to drop everybody in and hope that there's chemistry there, or maybe expect that there's going to be some chemistry there. Chemistry was just not there offensively. But watching this US side, I just wished it was more like build up play where, we could break teams down more properly, where it's like, okay, we're just chipping away. It's only a matter of time before the floodgates kind of open at that point. It doesn't ever seem like, or it doesn't seem recently like this USA side is able to kind of create that kind of situation. And it kind of got me thinking the number 10 role, the connector, the creator, the person that's pinging it around, just to zoom out a little bit too, or maybe to rewind back, I thought Keira Walsh for England looked unbelievable. Ton of touches, dangerous areas, and more advanced place on the field. A player like that, if they are on the U.S. women's national team roster, they haven't been put in that position. We haven't quite unlocked that skill set to be able to create that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think when you take Horan out of that role right now and kind of looking up and down the midfielders and the attacking midfielders that you have on this roster, I know there are a lot of Horan skeptics out there, and maybe not even skeptical. Maybe they think maybe Horan is rated higher than they would like internationally. But she does all those things that you talk about, that she is a calm passer. She will take the ball back and be like, okay, we didn't have the angle there. Let's reset. Let's kind of start to rebuild. You think about, too, a quick aside, when you're used to having Trinity Rodman on the right wing, and then she's not on the right wing, that then takes away all those Fox and Rodman actions that you could rely on. It takes away all those Horan and Rodman actions that you could rely on, that you could just go to 6 out of 11 possessions and just wear down the defense. And then all of a sudden you switch it and Swanson and Smith are attacking you from the other side. So obviously missing Rodman on the right is gigantic, but back to that number 10 of somebody who can kind of dictate the pace and dictate the action. Lindsey Horan's don't grow on trees.
Yep.
So we're not going to have one to put in as a backup. And I think this leads us into a fun exercise of Lindsey Horan is 30 years old. Now, if you ask the question, what's the future of the number 10 look like in the USWNT, maybe Lindsey Horan for the 2027 World Cup is a fairly reasonable answer. But you got to think about some other players in that role, and that leads us to maybe a draft.
I like it. Yeah, let's name some players, as we like to do. Before we get there, some funny Ballon d'Or results. Lindsey Horan voted 5th on the list, one of only 2 Lyon players. Shout out to whoever predicted that there would be as many Lyon players as there would be Chicago Red Stars on the top 30 of the Ballon d'Or.
I love it.
What an upset. But yeah, let's talk number 10s. Let's kind of explore some names of who we think could grow into that role. And I totally agree with you. Horan looked awesome, was a difference maker, has been playing really, really great for Lyon. And I continue to think that people's biggest beef maybe with Horan is when she misses ugly. But
yes,
it kind of overshadows all the really good things that she does, especially for irrational sports fans, not like either of us. But, I know that those tend to exist on the internet.
Of course.
But let's get to it. Number 10s. Who's tracking, towards this? Who could kind of fill this role? Let's imagine Horan is maybe more of a part-time player once we get to 2027.
If I had to take the number 1 pick of who I firmly believe should be the number 10 of the future of this program, with a bullet for me, it has to be Croy Bethune. Immediately walks into the NWSL, one of the most competitive leagues you could play in, and is maybe the best passer in the league in her first season, leading the league in assists. You talked about it last episode or maybe the episode before. Still leading the league in assists and injured her meniscus weeks and weeks ago, probably months ago at this point. The vision, the creativity, the scoring ability. She is the perfect connector. And I know I got real excited early in the season, and I stand by it. Maybe you can't compare her game directly to Lionel Messi, but you can compare her game to Luka Modric. Who's also another Ballon d'Or winner, by the way. You could compare her game to a Phil Foden type, where it's are you a little undersized? Sure. But you're such a genius and manipulate the ball so well, you could absolutely be a number 10 on maybe the best team in the world.
Totally. I mean, the Modric comp is great. Foden as well. Both of those players, or all 3 of those players, are, to borrow some basketball parlance, dribble, pass, shoot.
Yep.
I think they could do all of that at a high level. And her vision is just off the charts. I mean, she just will find you and she'll hit you with a perfect ball. I wanted to talk a little Corbin Albert, also a young player, 21 years old. I had been maybe projecting a player like Albert to be, be on the periphery of this conversation.
Yeah.
But I didn't quite see Albert really ball the way we might have been expecting.
Yeah.
I thought she looked a little hesitant. I think physically she continues to be one of the more impressive athletes that we have from a physicality standpoint. She's just a handful to deal with.
Yeah.
Not saying that she can't get there. Obviously, still 21 years old. A lot of growth for a player like that as well. But kind of left me a little underwhelmed, I think, with this performance against Iceland.
You make a great point, obviously, with her being a young player. You spotted this pretty early on when we realized at PSG she likes to get on the ball and rip shots.
Yeah.
She's like a head down attacking player a little more in the midfield, push the pace, like and then try to fire shots. And maybe this is just a matter of preference. I just don't think she quite has the passing creativity and even just the kind of on the ball creativity. When you talk about like dribble, pass, shoot, the dribble and the passing, I think you would see a little more of that. Even though she's young, a very creative football player, you can see the flashes of it even at a young age, and I'm not quite sure she has enough of it.
Yeah, she tried a very slick 1-2.
Yes.
I think in the second match that was the right decision.
Yeah.
But to your point, execution wise, the ball didn't find its target. The great idea, the right idea,
Yeah.
but not precise enough to kind of like connect that in a tight area where there's a bunch of defenders. And I think that's really what we're talking about here. Like,
Yes.
Who's the player that's going to be able to manipulate pretty much all of the pieces on the chessboard just with their creativity and, basically anticipation? Anybody else that you think could be somebody that can grow into that spot?
We have to consider her, and I realize the injury history is tough, but Emma Hayes loves Kat Macario, and she should, because Kat Macario, when she plays, is an incredible player. Now, she's 25 years old right now. She tore her ACL in May of 2022 and didn't return until March of 2024. Obviously, a brutal, devastating injury for her. She's looked really good in spots upon her return, but I want to say she's played like 10 to 15 matches kind of since March of 24, kind of coming back. You got to ease her back. You got to be careful with her. You got to take care of her. She has to take care of herself. So we have to see how that load management goes. But Emma Hayes very clearly saw her as, you are a number 10 that I can play underneath a number 9 like Mayra Ramirez. And if Emma Hayes is seeing that, we should be on board with that.
100%. Iceland, not a bullshit team. They're outside the top 10, just outside the top 10. They're currently second in their group in terms of Euro qualifying. They're one of just 8 teams who have already qualified for the Euros, actually 9 counting Switzerland. Yeah. They did smack Germany 3-0 in a match that, didn't mean nothing. Mm-hmm. Both teams kind of already had the inside track to qualify, but you never want to get just rolled like that. And then, as mentioned, they hung with the USA. I kind of dropped that stat about match 1, but in match 2, a little bit of the same. They spent 35 minutes on even terms. The USA spent 41 minutes down a goal.
Yeah.
So that's 76 plus minutes where, the game is either even or USA is -1. We got introduced to positionless basketball over the last 10 years. USA was playing a little bit of positionless football in that one where it was just like, okay, well, we're just run around, have a good time. There was also a lot of new faces.
Yeah.
A lot of new players making their debuts for the U.S. Women's National Team. So that's also going to have an effect. But yeah, not really what I was looking for. But luckily, a couple days here, I think we get another shot at watching this team versus Argentina.
For sure. So that leads me perfectly into the last player I want to name as a possible number 10, because you're right. It's more than just the number 10. And, again, we're talking about 2 3-1 victories here. Nothing to sneeze at against the number 13 team in the world. But again, we're talking about USWNT. We have to pick some nits here. We're trying to think about who is this link-up player, who's this attacking midfielder, this pure number 10 who could dribble, pass, shoot. What if you put Mallory Swanson at number 10? Now, You may ask yourself, well, I love triple espresso. I like having Swanson, Smith, Rodman from left to right up top. Well, we saw a young player kind of make some really big strides toward the end of the NWSL season and look very, very good in these 2 matches versus Iceland. And that is one teenager, Alyssa Thompson from Angel City FC. So what if you put Thompson on the left, Smith in the middle, Rodman on the right, and now Mallory Swanson is your number 10? And can she dribble, pass, and shoot? Mm-hmm. You're damn right she can. She can do all those things exceptionally well. And her link-up play and creativity, it's exceptional. We've talked about her. She can be a one-person offense when you need her to. But her ability to connect those passes and play 1-2s and kind of see the whole field is just elite. I mean, she didn't finish 6th in the Ballon d'Or voting for nothing. So, and what's great about Triple Espresso, Sophie Smith 4th, Mallory Swanson 6th. Trinity Rodman ninth in the Ballon d'Or. Not a bad trio to have. You put Thompson out on the left. You put Swanson in the middle. I think you could really be cooking with something there.
Wow. I hadn't considered that, but rewinding back, Swanson was all over the field.
She can.
Especially when the second match was in contest against Iceland. Like, she was just like, no, I'm going to run over here and get the ball. And then we're going to restart this whole thing. I think it's a great shout. I think she could do it. This is probably the least enviable part of Emma Hayes' job, is figuring this out, because you can also consider Jaden Shaw, who had an incredible goal. Like, when you think about what it took physically, athletically, creatively to be able to do that, those two, like, reaching, lunging, stretching, touch here, touch there, like, you know, just the audaciousness of those angles was crazy.
Yep.
And then the touch to kind of, like, you know, squirt it past the keeper. Not many players in the world, men or women, could pull off a move like that. It's going to be tough to keep her off the field as we approach 2027. The Supernova, Lily Johannes, yet to make a decision. I think she could definitely be in that mix.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, I thought of Lily watching these Iceland matches, because when Johannes made her debut, immediately she looked like a player that not only could keep up, but looked better than a good amount of players on the field in that moment within that context. We saw some players make their debut for USA over the course of these two matches. Some of them, you know, elevated, but I think Alyssa Thompson's a great shout in terms of a player who, obviously, she was on the 23 World Cup roster, so she's not making her debut, but left off the Olympic roster. Still 19 years old and looked the part of a superstar, looked the part of a player that could just drop right in there. I mean, playing like somebody that does not want to be left off another USWNT roster for the next decade plus.
Yep.
And what Lily did in her debut should have her in that mix, because she was, you know, that level of explosive, that level of creative, that level of productive. It wasn't just the potential. She actually, like, produced results on the pitch. I think she had that goal and an assist in just, 15 or so minutes time. But yeah, like I said, Emma Hayes, tough job. Hopefully all these players are in great form once we get to 27. And then it'll just be a matter of, like, mixing and matching and making sure that we can develop that chemistry.
Yeah, and she's going to have no shortage of options. I think we know that from this player pool that she's going to have a lot of tough choices to make. But, you know, that's why she gets paid the salary she does. And that's why she's regarded as one of the best football managers in the world, is because you have to trust her to make those decisions. Even if you might have your questions about the federation itself, which I do, and I think many people do, but you have the gold standard at the helm. So you got to trust her to do this right.
100%. And I'm glad we kind of landed on the young player, you know, or the debutantes, or, you know, like thinking about maybe the future of this tournament. I want to conduct a different type of mini draft here. I'm very curious to hear who you thought, I don't want to say played their way onto the roster, but, you know, we like to say, okay, a name's written in Sharpie, maybe somebody that's written in a light pen. Was there anybody that you're like, okay, this player now is sort of like in the inner circle of players we need to be thinking about as like a core player here going forward? I think Alyssa Thompson's a great one. What'd you see from Alyssa Thompson, or was there somebody else that you thought was kind of on that same level that just is now in that inner circle?
I would say I don't think there's a player who played on the same level in that category as Alyssa Thompson. She looked fantastic. Her club form has looked great. If you got the ITC record book handy, on that Emma Sears goal, the whole thing starts with Alyssa Thompson just ripping a shot off the post.
Oh, yeah.
Creates complete havoc. It falls to Sophie Smith. She tries to get it onto her right foot. It gets blocked. Falls to Sears. Sears knocks it home. I think Alyssa Thompson should get an assist for that, because that is like the whole, nothing happens without her getting the ball into a good position and just firing a shot. For Angel City, we're probably going on 8 weeks now or so, something in that ballpark, where she has just looked better and better and better every single week. The passing, the shooting, the vision. She finds the space. She creates a little space. And once she has that space for a shot or a pass, she has a pinpoint accuracy that really kind of shows. The 2023 World Cup was a rough go for her, and even stretches of the NWSL season, the past 2 years, a year and a half, or whatever we call it, year and 2/3 or whatever it's been. She's a teenager out there playing against NWSL athletes. She was having a hard time in some of those matches keeping up. It appears like, and I'm glad you say she played like somebody who doesn't look like she's going to be left off a roster. It looks like those days of her being really physically overwhelmed might be in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she's a lean stature kind of player, but the ball just flies off her boot. Like she's got
Crazy,
dynamite in those boots. It's insane. And I think as a two-way player, she was impressive.
Yep.
Like she had that one play where Lindsey Horan turns it over, left winger Dilya Zoomers ends up with the ball, and Alyssa Thompson just chased down block style. It was like, nope, I'm taking this right back. She starts the play maybe 6-7 yards behind, runs her down, wins the ball back. A player that looked like was like twice her size.
Yep.
She is just tenacious. And I think just to see a player like that playing two-way football, incredible. And I'm not sure if this was the catalyst, but Alyssa Thompson left off the Olympic roster and obviously wasn't in the form to, really, make the stride. It wasn't a lot of people out here losing sleep over, Alyssa not being on the roster, but left off after being included in the World Cup. I wonder if that sort of lit a fire in her. She's like, okay, this is over. Like now, right. I mean, I'm ready. I'm here now. She's playing like a player that believes that she belongs right now, today.
100%. And I think she does.
Absolutely. I mean, and she showed it. Who else stood out to you of, the youngins, the newcomers, as a name that's got to be in that mix for 27? In that super early mix, is super duper early mix for 27.
Yeah, what can you do? I mean, it's international break. We got to talk about these things. I just want to give and go real quick to you. What if I say these words to you? Emily Sams, Naomi Girma, center back duo of the future.
That's a nightmare for every other team. Give me a second. I got the Sharpie out here. You asked me for the ITC record book earlier. Don't have it handy. It's in a drawer here somewhere. But I've got the Sharpie, and I'm going to make a note to myself. I think Emily Sams, absolute lock, 25 years old. Got into a fun debate on Twitter about who the defender of the year was. There was somebody making the case for Girma. And I'm just like, Emily Sams, best defender on a historically great defense with regard to this league and what they've been able to do. And she's anchoring the whole thing, playing a ton of minutes. And then you see it on the field. Great example of a player that looks better than a lot of other players on the pitch. Is playing at the level, is playing above the level. I think the Olympics experience was huge.
Yep.
Absolutely approaching if we're having the cornerstone, the future potential cornerstone conversation, gotta be on that list from a defensive standpoint, the same way an Alyssa Thompson would be on that list from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, great call by you to say that she just looks better than other players on the pitch. When two players meet at the ball and one of them is Emily Sams is probably the one winning the ball in those situations just so consistently. Tierna Davidson is a really good and smart center back pairing with Naomi Girma. She is in for an absolute battle to hold on to that position, I think. I think Emily Sams, if, like you said, best player on the best defense in one of the best leagues in the world, that has to matter. And I think it does for Emma Hayes.
Even today, I feel like it's got to be Sams. I mean, she's playing out of her mind. Like she's like really wrecking the game.
Yes.
The same way a Girma does. And I think like just to have them play together. And I like Girma's, in my mind, more of like a well-positioned, smart, great passer, sort of like a control the tempo type defender. Sams is just a dog. Like she's just going to maul you. There was a point, I think right before halftime or maybe right after halftime in the second match, where Jones Dotier has like a real look and Sams just stonewalls her, which was like really incredible to see. Quick aside on that too, I had to switch over from the English telecast to Telemundo. I couldn't take any more. I love Julie Foudy. Love you, Julie. But couldn't take any more of Julie Foudy calling her John's daughter. Like John's son, John's daughter. I was like, it's just, I was like, whose daughter? But yeah, that's neither here nor there. Foudy's great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I will say it was funny. There was a moment too. Obviously, Foudy's absolute legend. I did think it was funny at one point. She goes, "Yeah, John's daughter. She's a nice little player." And I'd be like, "Well, yeah. I mean, she plays for Wolfsburg. She's actually very, very good, young player." And I honestly, to be fair to Foudy, I think that's what she meant, is that she's a young player who's still developing. But yeah, I just thought it was funny to describe her as a nice little player. And I was like, well, yeah, Wolfsburg, they tend to have those. Foudy would know better than me, though.
Also want to give a quick shout out to Emma Sears, 23 years old. I loved that she got the goal late just because it was so instinctive.
Yes.
And I like when players are not thinking too much. And I think player making their debut or kind of like very early in their international career, you have the tendency to maybe defer or take the extra touch. You lose a chance. But she was just like, nope, right here, boom, let it rip. perfect placement. That's a player that I think we have to watch as well in Emma Sears.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectly played off the left foot. Like we talked about the sequence that gets us there. Sophie Smith tries to get the ball onto her right foot after the Alyssa Thompson rocket. Smith gets it onto the right, gets blocked by the defender, and Sears just steps right up, calm as you like, and really got all of it. Gets all the way through the ball on her left foot. Yeah, and a lot of credit to her. They talked about her some on the broadcast. Scored 25 goals in her career at Ohio State.
Let's go.
Gets drafted 28th in this year's draft, the final draft in the history of the NWSL. That's pretty deep into the second round. So, chip on the shoulder, ready to come out and play. Good size, 5'9", has 5 goals and an assist in 25 matches played for Racing Louisville. Definitely an interesting player that, you think about U.S. Women's National Team and, in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong, stacked full of blue chippers, number one picks, players who play over in Europe. You don't get a lot of underdogs making this squad because it is so full of elite players. And maybe Emma Sears, I understand some athletes don't want to be called an underdog, but we've seen how the NWSL draft works in recent years, kind of when we try to prep for it and have looked back. Getting picked 28th, usually teams are able to kind of identify the talent early. A lot of teams have to be looking at themselves right now going, we could use Emma Sears, and we probably could have used her a lot earlier than the 28th pick.
For sure. It's like, how do we miss out on that?
Yeah.
A couple other players I wanted to mention that I thought definitely had some moments. Olivia Moutry.
Yep.
Yasmin Ryan, I thought looked really good in spots as well. All in all, a lot to get excited about, a lot to kind of keep our eye on, some stuff that, some good stuff, some bad stuff. It is a little nitpicky, if we really want to be a little self-critical. But, on the same note, they weren't playing Spain out there. They weren't playing England. They're playing a team that they should have been able to handle relatively easy at home. And we'll see what this USWNT roster looks like against Argentina coming up here in a couple of days. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it. I think most people will probably be listening to this maybe after the Argentina game, maybe shortly before the Argentina game. Let us know, who did we miss thinking about the future number 10? Who did we miss thinking about young players who are going to kind of rise up and make this roster? I will say real quick, if I can do one more thing to hit, Laura Harvey up here in Seattle has spoken extremely highly of Jordan Bugg, another center back, and has talked about her as a potential international player. This center back room, this whole back line could get real crowded real fast, but Jordan Bugg's only 17, so she's going to have, a few years to get up. But, man, she looked really good towards the end of the NWSL season. I guess maybe the final takeaway is a lot of good players in this country.
What a time to be alive. And a special shout out to great friend of the show, Bridie O'Toole, busy watching women's soccer, who had a great breakdown of the first Iceland matchup. Go subscribe to her pod. It's an incredible show. Great watch. Very insightful. Shout out to Bridie. Come back soon. We miss you around here.
Yeah, where you been? What are you doing? What are you, busy doing a bunch of cool stuff? Jeez.
It's big time in us over here. I don't know, All right, man. I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, just playing, hanging out with your boys and friends of the show, hanging out with them too. We appreciate it. This is a family affair here at the ITC. Remember to like if you liked and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grand Angle, for being pretty much the perfect center back partner as your boys lock things down at the ITC. I appreciate you, man.
Likewise, buddy. I appreciate the shout. I would like to say that obviously we're operating into the channels, but we stop anybody from scoring into the channels. I don't even know where I'm going with this. If we're a center back pairing, we're a good center back pairing. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. We will see you next time.